Happy New Year.
We've just started the conference recording. I want to welcome the members and staff and our guests to the first meeting of the authority in 2017. It's good to have you all here. We have a lot of work to do today, and we're going to get to it in just a minute. But before we do, I thought I'd say a few words in memory of Dean Leith, a favorite son of Troy, who passed away last week. Mr. Leith served on this board, sat at this table from 1998 until 2005, 7 years. He was a Senate appointee, which means that he was a predecessor of my dear friend and colleague, Jerry Rumsky. He was a businessman, a very practical man, I'm told. I did not know him, but there are members who did, and there are staff members who did. He co-founded a company called Garden Way, Inc. in Troy. They manufactured farm and garden equipment, much of it motorized. The story is that his firm actually built the motors. I heard last night that they did not use what was the gold standard of the day in small engines. Mr. Leith was committed to that business, apparently, rising ultimately to become its present CEO. He is remembered by staff members and the board members as a very practical and pragmatic man. His business acumen apparently brought a great deal to the table. His departing resolution read in part, his practical and business-oriented questions and comments regarding clients' financial conditions, investment strategies, and corporate governance heightened our awareness of critical issues and expanded the authority's ability to serve its clients. The construction business at DASNY doubled during Mr. Leith's tenure. He was admired by many, and a man who brought to the table assurance, quiet business assurance. We offer our condolences to his family during their time of grief, and we thank them for his service. Dean Leith was 84 years old. With that, we will begin the business of the day with the first agenda item, which is the approval of minutes. You all have had a chance to review the minutes. Are there any recommended changes or revisions? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes? John Gardner, thank you. Is there a second? Sandra, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. We move to the Finance Committee report. Chairman Rumsky.
Mr. Chair, the Finance Committee met yesterday afternoon up in Albany after adopting the meeting minutes from the December board meeting, committee meeting. We advanced and discussed three financings. One was Columbia University, the other was Siena College. On both of those, after some discussion, that we recommend that they be approved today. And the last was the Montefiore TELP and we also recommend that that be approved today. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Any questions for Jerry on the Finance Committee? Hearing none, then we'll move to the adoption of financing documents and resolutions, therefore. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning and welcome. We're very excited about 2017. Behind tab 3 is the NYSARC Inc. transaction with co-bond counsel Melissa Bennett, Esquire of Barclay Damon, LLP, and Gabriel Maroos of Maroos Law Group, PC, and Steve Crozier, presented.
Good morning.
I just have a brief update before Melissa and Gabriel present the documents. As you mentioned, this is the adoption of documents for NYSARC Inc. The purpose of the financing is to finance some new money projects, refinance some taxable indebtedness, and to refund Series 2007A, 2007B, and 2009A bonds. At this time, probable that the 2007A bonds will not be part of the financing due to decreased savings. However, the 2007B and 2009A still have significant savings, so we expect them to be included in the refunding. The project list has changed as the participating chapters have reassessed their financing needs. Attached to the credit summary update is a revised project list. Most notably, the Allegheny chapter and Broome-Tioga chapter projects have come out, whereas alternatively the Warren Washington chapter has added up projects. And in conclusion, Moody's has published its rating of AA2 for the proposed issuance.
Thank you, Steve. Melissa, Gabriel?
Good morning. Today before you for consideration are two related series resolutions for issuance of bonds under the NYSARC Revenue Bonds Resolution adopted in March 2009. NYSARC is a 501c3 not-for-profit corporation and the largest provider of services to people with developmental disabilities in the U.S. NYSARC provides services throughout the state of New York through over 45 regional chapters. NYSARC is licensed by the New York State Office for Persons with Developmental Disabilities, known as OPWDD, and also licensed by other state agencies to provide residential and rehabilitation services on behalf of the state. The 2009 NYSARC resolution authorizes DASNY to issue multiple series of bonds for the benefit of NYSARC without limits on amounts and with or without credit enhancements. Melissa will go over some of the details included in the proposed resolutions, series resolutions.
Good morning. The series resolutions before you authorize two additional series of bonds in an amount not to exceed $45 million in the aggregate to fund loans, to finance or refinance facilities used by approximately 20 of NYSARC's chapters. Payment on the 2017 bonds will be separately secured from the series of bonds previously issued under the 2009 resolution. The series resolutions before you contemplate that the proceeds of the 2017 bonds will be used to pay the cost of the financing or refinancing of facilities for use by certain of NYSARC's chapters and which have not been previously financed by DASNY, to refund certain outstanding DASNY bonds issued for NYSARC in 2007 and 2009, to fund debt service reserve funds, and to pay costs of issuance. Each series resolution delegates to DASNY officers the power to establish various terms of the bonds and their sale, including the term of the bonds, which is not to exceed 25 years, the interest rates on the bonds, which is not to exceed 7.5%, redemption dates and prices, with redemption prices not to exceed 102%, the amount of the debt service reserve fund requirements, if any, and the purchase price by the underwriters of the bonds.
It is expected that the first series of bonds to be issued, 2017A, will be issued as tax-exempt fixed-rate bonds without credit enhancement, and that the second series of bonds, 2017B, will be issued as taxable fixed-rates bonds also without credit enhancement. Their proceeds to be used to pay for any cost not eligible for tax-exempt financing under federal tax laws. The 2009 resolution also contemplates separate loan agreements for separate series of bonds issued on different dates. The loan agreement between NYSARC and DASNY relating to the bonds to be issued will obligate NYSARC to make payments to the trustee in amount sufficient to pay for debt services on the bonds as it becomes due. In addition, amounts required to be paid for fees, costs, and expenses of DASNY and the trustee will be paid to DASNY. NYSARC's obligations under the loan agreements are general obligations payable out of any monies of NYSARC available for that purpose. In case of a payment default, the loan agreement provides for an intercept of public funds to satisfy NYSARC's payment obligations. More precisely, the loan agreement provides that NYSARC will grant to DASNY a security interest in certain pledged revenues consisting of all public funds payable to each NYSARC chapter participating in this financing. Those public funds consist primarily of payments to NYSARC under OPWDD contracts. Note that the security interest in the pledge revenues will be subordinated to the prior pledges identified in the loan agreements. Those prior pledges include pledges made to secure prior series of DASNY bonds. Now, to conclude, Melissa will go over some of the other aspects of the transaction.
It is expected that NYSARC's obligations under the loan agreement will also be secured by mortgages on the facilities being financed by DASNY for the first time, and by mortgages on the facilities being refinanced by the refunding of the 2007 and 2009 bonds, which mortgages were first granted when the refunded bonds were first issued. The bonds are proposed to be sold to Raymond James and Associates on a negotiated basis pursuant to the proposed bond purchase agreement, which is in customary form. As Steve previously mentioned, Moody's has reviewed and assigned an enhanced rating of AA2 to both series of bonds. NYSARC DASNY, the trustee, and Digital Assurance Certification will also enter into an agreement to provide continuing disclosure in customary form. Are there any questions?
Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the transaction? Thank you very much, Sandra. Is there a second? Second. Charlie, thank you. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. There's no opposition. Motion carries unanimously. Steve, Gabriel, Melissa, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Behind tab 4 is the Orange Regional Medical Center obligated group transaction with bond counsel Hal Patrick Esquire of Harris Beach and Matt Bergen presenting.
Al, Matt, good morning.
Good morning.
Very well. You can lift it. Matt, would you show Hal how to lift the seat?
Yep. Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. I want to give the board an update as to the current plan of finance. This is a slight change from what was originally approved at the December 8th meeting, I believe it was. Under the current plan of finance, it's being proposed that if the medical center received upgrades to investment grade status from 2 rating agencies for a period of 2 consecutive years, and that they also meet a liquidity test, which is currently proposed to be 95 days cash on hand, that their current debt service reserve fund would be changed and allocated to a construction fund to be used for routine capital expenditures or purchases. In addition, at the time of the end of the 2 years, when we look like this is going to come to fruition, we would also seek a rating agency confirmation from at least 2 of the rating agencies that the rating on the Series 2017 bonds would not be adversely impacted by the release of the debt service reserve fund to a construction fund. I'm going to let Hal explain the documents, but that's the latest proposal from the institution.
Thank you, Matt.
Before you, for your consideration and adoption, are a supplemental resolution that will amend and supplement the authority's Orange Regional Medical Center obligated group revenue adopted originally by the authority in March 26, 2008. In addition, there was before you a series resolution authorizing Orange Regional Medical Center obligated group revenue bonds, Series 2017, in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $285 million. The Series 2017 bonds are being issued for the benefit of Orange Regional Medical Center and are going to be used to refund the authority's outstanding Series 2008 bonds that were issued by the authority in 2008. And they were in the original aggregate principal amount of $261,345,000. It's expected that in addition to paying for the refunding and the cost of issuance, that bond proceeds will be used to fund a portion of the debt service reserve fund at closing. There's other monies available that will also go into the debt service reserve fund. As in most cases, each series of bonds is secured by revenues. which are the payments made under the loan agreement. But as you know, in master trust indenture transactions, there are also a separate obligation issued under the master trust indenture that will secure the bond. The obligation is issued in the par amount of the bonds. There were obligations issued in 2015 for security for the authority's 2015 bonds issued for Orange Region Medical Center. That obligation remains outstanding. However, the 2008 bonds, when refunded, will result in the cancellation of the original obligation issued under the MDI. So we'll be left with obligations 2 and 3, securing the 15 bonds and the 17 bonds. The supplemental resolution is a resolution that's authorized under the general resolution, and a key factor of it is that it has to be done in a way so long as the modifications of the general resolution do not adversely affect the interests of existing bondholders, and that will be true of the modifications we're talking about. The general resolution directs the trustee to fund any debt service reserve fund with bond proceeds or a reserve fund facility, which is a surety bond, insurance policy, or letter of credit. The impetus for the supplemental indenture is to make a change to the requirement of the general resolution with respect to the either the surety bond or the insurance policy. Currently, the requirement is that the institution that gets a surety bond or an insurance policy for a deposit of the debt service reserve fund would have to have that surety or insurance policy rated in the highest rating category of rating agencies and rating insurance companies. The opportunity to obtain such a facility is somewhat limited, and to make it more possible in today's economic climate, the institution has asked that the criteria of highest rating category be reduced, and the supplemental indenture will reduce the highest rating category to the second highest rating category, which broadens the market for potential facilities. So down the road, not at initial issuance of the 17 bonds, but down the road, along with the idea of getting a higher rating and releasing the debt service reserve fund for construction, they also may be able to save themselves some money by using a reserve fund facility. And if they do, the surety bond or insurance policy will only have to be in the second highest grade. And so that is what the sum and substance of the supplemental indenture is about. The other features of the Series 2017 bonds include that they will be offered to the public on a limited basis. This is the same basis upon which the previous series of bonds have been offered. That means that the bonds will be offered to qualified institutional buyers, accredited investors, or sophisticated municipal market professionals. These are all under the SEC rules. Purchasers who would be qualified by both experience and capitalization to be able to purchase the bonds. Matt has already covered the debt service reserve fund release and the conditions upon which it can be released. These bonds will also have a separate loan agreement, payments under which are going to pay the debt service on the bonds, and the loan agreement has the usual conditions that you see in the loan agreement for any of the authority's revenue bonds. The MTI obligation, as of past two, are issued under a master trust indenture that was first adopted in 2008. And all obligations under the master trust indenture are joint and several obligations of the members of the group. In this group, there is only a single member at the present time, although others can be added. If they are added, the conditions for their adding to the group require that the financial covenants of the group continue to be met after the addition, and that they affirmatively acknowledge their obligation to the joint and several obligations of all outstanding debt of the obligated group member. There's also, as there was in the prior deals, a guarantee. There's a related medical group, the GHVHS Medical Group. It's a professional corporation of doctors that works with the hospital, and they will guarantee the 2017 bonds as they did the 2008 and 15 bonds. Also, just to confirm, the MTI and the supplemental indenture under the MTI that will authorize the issuance of obligation number 3 also contain financial reporting and other covenants that they, members of the obligated group, are obligated to meet, and that includes all the reporting that the authority expects. These bonds are proposed to be sold through a negotiated sale to a syndicate of underwriters represented by J.P. Morgan Securities, LLC, and as I mentioned, there's restriction on the sale of bonds. That describes the bonds. I just want to note that I expected our co-counsel from Brown and Hutchison to join us this morning. Michelle Hutchison and I spoke very early this morning. Traveling conditions on the thruway coming east were just not conducive to a trip, and so she was not able to be here, expresses her regrets, and hopefully the parts that she was going to do that I did were up to her par. So we'll see. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Hal. Are there questions for Matt or for Hal? Yes, Sam.
Hal, your letter says that if the debt service refunds are released, that they'll be applied according to the loan agreement.
Yes, that's right.
What does that mean? What would they be?
It means that they have to be used for good capital costs because they're tax-exempt bonds. If you release the reserve funds, you can't just give them back to the borrower. It would not be a correct use under the tax agreement they have with the authority. So, and the institution understands full well that if the money is released, it has to be applied to costs of this project, which is, of course, the main hospital. But they couldn't take the money and build another project that hadn't been put through the TEFRA process and so forth.
Use it for budget relief?
No, they couldn't use it for budget relief. I mean, what they can do is use it to replace other capital expenditures that they might have made out of their own equity, and they would be able to use it, continue to pay debt service on it, but they would not be able to use it for cash relief or anything like that.
Is there a realistic expectation that this might happen?
They have been, I've been involved in both of the other deals as well, and they have thought that they could get to an investment grade for some time. Their performance is certainly solid. Matt can speak better to it than I can. So it's hard to say, but the trend seems to be in a positive direction. I wouldn't expect it to happen tomorrow. And the requirements are that they have to have 2 years of performance under that rating and then have the days cash on hand. Those are fairly substantial hurdles for any hospital.
Just one other note, any part of the reason that we have the reference to the loan agreement is any reimbursements or releases from the construction fund have to be approved by DOH.
The use of it, not the release itself. Right?
Well, in order, before we can release it, DOH has to approve.
So it is the release and the use. Wow. Are there other questions for Matt or Hal? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the transaction?
So
Thank you, Sam. Is there a second? Charlie, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. Okay, none opposed, the matter carries, the motion carries unanimously. Hal, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Behind tab 5 is the Columbia University transaction, co-bond counsel John G. Cole, Esquire, of Nixon Peabody, and Vivian Brohan, Esquire of Brohan Lee, and David Ostrander presenting.
Good morning.
The board's being asked to adopt 2 series of tax-exempt and/or taxable fixed and/or variable rate bonds with terms not to exceed 31 years and an amount not to exceed $200 million on behalf of Columbia University. Bond proceeds from the 2017 issuance will be used for both new money and refunding purposes. New money proceeds are expected to be used to finance numerous projects located throughout the Columbia University system. And this is expected to include various construction, renovation, foundation, and site preparation projects related to the university's expansion into the Manhattanville campus, as well as renovation projects at both the Morningside and Medical Center campuses. And if you turn to attachment 1 in the staff report, these projects are laid out in detail. The one thing I'll point out is the first project on the list, the Columbia Business School. The bulk of the 2017 proceeds are expected to be used towards foundation and below grade service facility work for that, in preparation for that facility, which is the construction is expected to begin in 2017. The actual 2 buildings to be constructed on the property, the university expects to use fundraising proceeds to construct those buildings. The bond proceeds will also be used to refund all or a portion of the DASNY Series 2004 C bonds, totaling $49.4 million.
Assuming current market conditions, a total net present value savings in the range of $8.6 million or 17.8% of the refunded bonds is expected from the proposed refunding. Although we're asking the board for broad authorization, as far as the financing structure, the university does plan to issue one series of tax-exempt fixed-rate bonds. As far as security, as with previous Columbia transactions, this will be a general obligation of the university. The university is currently rated AAA by both Moody's and S&P, with both rating agencies assigning a stable outlook to the university, and accordingly, Columbia qualifies for an unsecured borrowing under DASNY's financing guidelines. The board has seen the Columbia's credit for a number of years, and a lot of the trends that you've seen in the past continue in a positive direction. The university continues to experience positive demand and enrollment trends and remains among the most selective universities in the country. Of the 36,292 applicants for fall of 2016, just 2,279 were accepted, which is only an acceptance rate of only 6.3%. And total headcount grew to 31,317 for fall of 2016, which was a 5-year high. Operating margins have averaged over $240 million annually, which is a 6.1% average. And the operating margin was $270.1 million for fall of 2016. The university continues to report significant net assets, which exceeded $13 billion at fiscal year end 2016. And the university's reserves continued to grow even during a period of high capital spending associated with the Manhattanville expansion, with expendable net assets increasing from $7.1 billion in 2012 to $8 billion in 2016. And much of this has been accomplished through fundraising, which has allowed the university to make substantial capital investment without significantly impacting their leverage. And since 2012, Columbia has invested over $1 billion in their property, plant, and equipment, while long-term debt increased by just over $100 million.
David, thank you. John?
He's pretty much made my entire presentation.
He does that sometimes.
What's before you is the adoption of 2 series resolutions to be authorized under the existing general resolution put in place for financing Columbia University in 2000 and subsequently amended and restated 2008. The purposes for the 2 series is to give a little flexibility if needed to separate the refunding portion of the transaction from the new money. The refunding obviously is affected by interest rates. Given the current market, it's unlikely that there would be any need to separate them, so that one series is more than likely that what's going to be done here. The bonds, when issued, will be special obligations of the authority payable solely out of loan repayments to be made by Columbia University pursuant to the loan agreement, again put in place in 2000 as amended and restated. That loan agreement imposes a general obligation on Columbia. They're obligated to make loan repayments solely out of any funds available to them. There are no mortgages on any of their facilities, no pledged revenues or other security interests in property of Columbia supporting their obligations under the loan agreement. Similarly, the bonds are not secured by a debt service reserve fund. They are purely payable out of the general obligation of Columbia University. With that, I'll ask Vivian to take you through what's in the series resolutions.
Good morning. Each of the series resolutions authorizes the issuance of up to $200 million of authorized bonds for the purposes of 1, financing the cost of a variety of capital improvements, 2, refunding all or a portion of the 2004 C bonds, 3, paying the cost of issuance incurred in connection with the issuance of the authorized bonds. Both series resolutions provide the aggregate principal of authorized bonds that may be issued pursuant to them may not exceed $200 million. Each of the series resolutions delegates to various officers of the authority the power, among others, to determine with respect to the series of bonds authorized by it, 1, the principal amount of authorized bonds to be issued, 2, the dates or dates on which such bonds will mature, 3, the rates or rates at which the authorized bonds will bear interest, 4, the purchase price to be paid for the authorized bonds, 5, the redemption dates and prices of the bonds, 6, whether any of the bonds will be subject to purchase in lieu of redemption and the terms on which they may be purchased, 7, whether any of the authorized bonds will be book entry bonds in the depository for them. And 8, the rights of and security for any bank or insurance company providing a letter of credit or a financial guarantee. Each series resolution also authorizes various officers of the authority to prepare, execute, and deliver a preliminary and final official statement, to execute a bond purchase agreement, to execute an agreement to provide continuing disclosure among the state university, the trustee, and the authority, if required, in order for the underwriter and subsequent dealers to comply with Rule 15C2 through 12, and execute any and all documents and do anything necessary or convenient in connection with the sale and issuance of the applicable bonds.
Vivian, thank you. Are there questions for John or Vivian?
For David. David, you note in your written report that the universities worked closely with the local community around the campus. But because there's been such a history of community and neighborhood involvement in these projects in the past, and elected officials, state legislators, city council members, and others have been active in that, what about these projects? What can we anticipate in that regard?
Well, I think certainly back early when the university was looking into the Manhattanville expansion, there was a lot of discussions with both the state and the local community. And there was a lot of issues that they needed to work through at that time. There is a community development agreement in place with the local community. And I think a lot of those issues have sort of been put to rest at this point. So the university has all the necessary approvals that they need for the full Manhattanville expansion, so we don't expect any community opposition related to this particular project.
Dave, I would just add to that the new money aspect of this had to go through a TEFRA hearing in advance of this board meeting, and has been the case in the last few new money financings for Columbia, which have included the new Manhattanville campus. No one showed up.
So at this point, it would seem that this area that represents the new campus and the extension, that the community has in general accepted.
Seems so, yes.
That's the evidence. Thank you.
The very first meeting for the TEFRA hearing for the Manhattanville campus wasn't quite so quiet.
No.
That's true. Are there other questions for David or John? Yes, Paul.
So there's a reference to the one risk, the dependence on patient care revenues, and obviously this being Columbia, there's strong finances, but it seems in this climate, any risk related to healthcare spending is one to at least be attended to. Is this a real risk, or is it theoretical and negligible risk?
I'd say it's a negligible risk. I mean, when we look at a lot of universities, one of the weaknesses that we point out is they rely on enrollment, and they rely on that revenue source. Columbia has a pretty diverse revenue source. They're getting investment returns, they're getting enrollment. And one of the aspects of that, which is a substantial portion, is the patient care revenue. I think the only reason we point it out is because there's some volatility associated with that revenue stream, but I think in context with the overall organization, I think it's a very minor risk.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve?
So moved.
Thank you very much, Paul. Terry, thank you very much for the second. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Before you all leave the table, it's a great day for the authority. It's a sad day for the authority. There are all sorts of varying emotions about today. One of the sad things about today is that this was John Gove's last presentation to the DASNY board. And I won't spill any of the beans. John wants to. I wanted John to say a few words after. But let me say personally, and I'll invite anybody else at the table who wants to say something. In my tenure at DASNY, one of the things that has given me great comfort was to have the opportunity to read a John Gove opinion. We have relied on John's expertise and his writing skill during my tenure, certainly, to help us resolve some thorny, that's legalese for tough, and sometimes vexing problems. John makes it look easy. It isn't easy. John is thoughtful in the way that he presents to us because he understands that he is covering a lot of ground with a lot of people who think differently about problem solving. And John has figured it out. He knows how to do it. I think that this authority has benefited enormously from John Bove's service. I think we as members have benefited from John Bove's service, and I know I personally, John, have benefited from your service. Thank you for all that you have done for DASNY. There's no question that you'll be missed. I'm not quite sure whether we can go get you somewhere, but I don't think they're going to let us do that. So please.
I'll be around.
Okay. Go into your retirement, John, knowing that your service here was very much appreciated. Know that it was appreciated to people who don't know you, by people who don't know you, around the state of New York. You've just helped us enormously. Thank you for that. I'm done.
I would like to say a couple things, and since it's not a transaction presentation, it may be a little more nervous and disjointed. My first appearance before Dormitory Authority Board was on November 9th, 1982. So we're talking about 82. Your dad.
I was in high school.
I was a 36-year-old new partner at Montrose, Guthrie, Alexander, and Verdun. I usually leave out the Mitchell and Nixon part of the name, but it was their prior firm. And I started representing the authority in adversity. Lombard Wall and Alliance Capital had just gone bankrupt. You had many investments and repurchase agreements with them. So you were actively involved in the bankruptcy proceedings. And became bond counsel after that. And there's some symmetry to this meeting. My very first transaction for the Dormitory Authority, though it didn't close first, it came here first, was financing for Columbia University. So there is symmetry to that. So the 34 years is like a career in and of itself. And throughout all the changes in the board and all the changes in the staff, one thing has remained very, very true to me, and that is the boards have always been engaged, inquisitive, and perceptive. Enough so to keep me very much on my toes all the time. The staff, I really can't say enough about all of the staff that I've worked with over the years. It's a very dedicated and motivated group of people, very smart, and more than that, awfully nice people. And it's made it a pleasure working with this authority. Your participation as board members, I want to tell you, is not typical of a conduit financing entity who pretty much leave things to their outside financial advisors, counsels, and other experts. And I really think that you have brought something very important to the table in working with all of the institutions that you've financed over the years. Lastly, I want to let you know that I think, and I hope you will come to feel this as well, that you're being left in very good hands at Nixon. Virginia Wong, who's appeared before you for a few meetings now in my place, has been with me working on a dormitory authority matters since she was a first-year associate. And behind her are 3 very smart tax lawyers who have worked with the authority for a very long time, and 2 very competent senior associates in counsel, Jennifer Wheeler and Abby Olson, names you probably have never heard. All of these people have been tasked with the difficulty of making me appear smart. And they've done, I think, a reasonably good job of keeping me on my toes as well. So I think while I will clearly miss being here, I will clearly miss working with your staff and working on your transactions. I won't miss chasing business. But you are left in good hands at Nixon Peabody.
John, thank you for your service to the people of the state of New York.
I'm sorry, could I say just a few words? And I generally wouldn't do this sort of as staff, but I really feel that I'd like to say this to John in particular. John brings legal expertise, but because of his background in government, he brings a different sensibility to the job, and one that we've benefited from tremendously. You know, John worked in the counsel's office for the governor a number of governors ago. He was the general counsel at HFA, if I'm recalling correctly. He was the general counsel at MAC, if I'm remembering John's resume correctly. That governmental experience has served us so well. You know, in particular, when we worked with John on the SUNY dorms transaction, and I've always meant to say this to you, John, that perspective so benefited us in terms of being able to do the work that we needed to do to establish that credit, because it was such a government kind of discussion. It was, and that's a different kind of discussion than necessarily happens on a private client financing. And your ability to bring that knowledge in terms of government, in terms of our role, in terms of what we are concerned about from a corporate governance perspective, in terms of our relationship with the various parties in state government, was so very instrumental. And every time we turned around and every time we had a question, John's response, to my great relief, was always, well, I thought about that, and this is what I did. And I say that with all genuineness every single time, because there were many times where I had questions kind of late in the game, and John would always say, well, that's okay, I thought about that, and this is what I did. And so, again, I generally wouldn't say something as staff in this kind of a setting, but I felt that I really should say it, and just thank you for all of the work that you've done on our behalf.
Very much appreciated.
Portia, thank you.
I hope I never have to draft documents with 37 different equations.
Take care, John.
Okay. Thank you. Behind tab 6 is the Siena College transaction. Steve Kozier will present the credit summary and staff report.
Morning. Morning, follow. The staff report presents fixed and/or variable rate, tax-exempt indoor taxable bonds to be sold in either a negotiated offering or private placement in an amount not to exceed $45 million, with maturities not to exceed 23 years on behalf of Siena College. Siena is a 4-year private college located in Loudonville that was founded in 1937 and has been a DASNY client since 1964. The college's only long-term debt obligations are its DASNY Series 2006 and Series 2009 bonds, which have approximately $36 million outstanding. The proposed Series 2017 bonds are expected to refund the Series 2006 and Series 2009 bonds and to finance approximately $3.6 million in deferred maintenance. The refundings are expected to result in net present value savings estimated at $4.2 million, or 12% of the bonds being refunded. The terms of the refundings will not exceed the terms of the bonds being refunded. The annual debt service savings are expected to be in excess of the annual debt service on the new money issuance. Therefore, Siena's annual debt service obligation is anticipated to decline following the transaction. Staff is requesting the flexibility to issue variable rate bonds and also have the ability to sell the bonds through a negotiated offering. However, the expectation is that the Series 2017 bonds will be fixed rate and sold through a private placement. There is currently a request for proposals out to qualified institutional buyers to be the bank purchaser of the bonds. The financing terms and security for the private placement will be determined by the purchaser selected by the college and will be described more fully when we return to the board for adoption of documents. Should the college decide to sell the bonds through a negotiated offering, security would still be in accordance with DASNY's security guidelines. The college is rated Baa1 by Moody's, therefore security would include a pledge of revenues and a mortgage, and the loan agreement would also contain financial covenants. Regarding Sienna's operations, Sienna is dependent on student-related charges with net tuition and fees plus auxiliary service revenue accounting for approximately 80% of total operating revenue in 2016. FTE enrollment declined from 3,162 students in 2012 to 3,090 students in 2014. Enrollment has increased in each of the last 2 years. In 2016, FTE enrollment came in at 3,167, which is a 5-year high. The college's operating performance has been approximately break-even over the past 5 years, with the exception of 2014, when the college reported a net operating margin of negative $4 million. In 2016, the college had an operating margin of 0.2%, while the DASNY median was 0.0%. The college reported a viability ratio of 1.2 to 1 for fiscal year 2016, indicating sufficient expendable net assets to cover its outstanding debt. And since 2012, the college has an average debt service coverage ratio of 2.1 to 1.
Steve, thank you. Are there questions for Steve? Yes, Sam.
Just wanted to know, Stephen, I know you couldn't have known this when you wrote the report, but we probably should know for the record that if the governor's proposal as of this week to provide tuition assistance to public institutions is passed, that will represent a significant challenge to private institutions such as Sienna in terms of competing for students.
Absolutely, that will have private schools, and Sienna, one of their main competitors is the SUNY system. So absolutely, that's something that they'll have to combat and address. And they're certainly, at this time, on record, lobbying the governor to include private schools in a program such as the Excelsior program. So we'll see if that goes anywhere, but it's something to keep an eye on. But Sienna's management has been successful in managing its enrollment and also its pricing strategy and also its expenses to manage the fluctuations in enrollment. So it's something we'll need to keep an eye on. But as far as this financing, obviously I think this is a great financing for the school. It's mainly a refunding that will produce savings for the college. So, but
I also had a question. The deferred maintenance projects that will be funded under this, I assume that these are major maintenance projects that have a useful life of some significance. We're not talking about minor maintenance. Yeah, these are mainly infrastructure projects.
It's called deferred maintenance, but it's really an acceleration of deferred maintenance. For example, they have some boilers that they plan to replace that really they're not scheduled for replacement yet. It's really a risk mitigation strategy to move that cost to a capital cost as opposed to an operational cost should it need to be replaced in the near future.
What's the term of the debt of the government?
Sorry, what was that?
What's the term of the debt?
They're expecting it probably to be around 15 years, so depending on the useful life, but it would definitely be shorter than the currently outstanding debt. I think the 2009 expire in 23 years, and they absolutely don't plan to go beyond that. So it'll be determined based on tax review.
Sandra, thank you. For the record here, you should know others that your tuition question was raised, Charlie raised it yesterday in the Finance Committee meeting, and there was a substantial discussion about it, after which the committee made the decision to recommend it. So there have now been 2 discussions about this. I think it's a very important point to make, and And I think, and Steve understands that we're going to have to keep an eye on this for that reason.
We have a lot of clients.
We do.
Be effective, but
Agreed.
there's a long way to go on any proposal.
Agreed. Are there any other questions for Steve? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the transaction? Jerry, thank you. Is there a second? Charlie, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. There's no opposition. The motion carries unanimously. Steve, thank you. Thank you.
Behind tab 7 is the Montefiore Medical Center TELP transaction with Portia Lee presenting.
Behind tab 7 is the TELP financing in the amount of $18 million on behalf of Montefiore Medical Center. As you know, it's a policy of Public Utilities Control Board that requires that TELP leases that exceed $10 million be brought before the board and PACB for approval. This is a TELP financing for various types of equipment, including information technology, imaging, neurology, and pharmacy equipment, all is listed out on the equipment list page, which is attached to the memo. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Portia, thank you. Questions about this transaction?
Yeah, just a comment for the sake of full disclosure. The portions of this project were subject to the department's prior review and approval. It was submitted under numerous applications from program ladder to the piece of the program at Montefiore. Not all of them have been completed in terms of their review, but the expectation, my information at this point is that the remaining issues for the 3 outstanding applications the issues can be overcome, and they're typically worked out with the facility. So I can support the application at this point.
Charlie, thank you. May I have a motion, please, to approve the TELP transaction? Thank you very much, John Gardner. Is there a second? Jerry, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. The next agenda item is the Audit Committee report. Chairman Gardner.
Thank you. The Audit Committee met yesterday. We welcomed Paul Ellis to his first meeting. We had a presentation from Kim on a proposed amendment to our investment guidelines. The Audit Committee voted to recommend the amendment, but we will take it up at the next meeting of the board. We also had an update on the status of the internal audit from Kathy Everett. The audit is moving along well. We are short-staffed. We talked a little bit about that, but we seem to be managing that and covering the most significant internal audits that we need to be doing. So that is my report. I guess I will be making a recommendation at the next meeting.
John, thank you. Very good meeting. Very good meeting. Thank you. Questions for John? Hearing none, we're going to move to management reports, the first of which is the report of the president.
Thank you. Good morning again. Once more, I want to say it is exciting to be here and begin a fresh year. We had a tremendously successful year in 2016. Our expectation is to continue with that. We have a few items for your consideration today, including a resolution honoring the 19 members of our organization who retired last year. You will also receive from the Chief Financial Officer, Kim Nadeau, our proposed budget. But before we get into that, there are a few items I want to bring to your attention that show how hard we have been working and achieving success in our ongoing effort to improve the public's understanding of the incredible work DASNY does across our great state. 2016, as I noted, was a banner year for DASNY in many respects, and our efforts did not go unnoticed. DASNY finished the year strong and was cited by the bond buyer and Reuters as having the highest number of low-cost, tax-exempt bond issuances in the nation through all of 2016. So we were number one in terms of the number of tax issuances. The $5.9 billion DASNY delivered to the market over 37 issuances provides savings to the authority's health and education clients. This positions us for continued success in 2017. We are helping New York State's hospitals provide best-in-class health care, and its renowned educational institutions better provide for students and attract the best educators. Now, I also hope you've had a chance to review our newest presentation, the Capabilities Brochure. This brochure has been distributed internally and is currently being used by our staff in their external presentations with clients. It will also be distributed to targeted contacts in the coming months. This new Capabilities Brochure is the product of several months of collaboration across DASNY, led by our communications and marketing team. It is unlike any other marketing piece DASNY has produced. It successfully answers the primary question any client or potential client would ask: what can DASNY do for me? In answering this question, the Capabilities Brochure takes the reader through the life of a project. At each step, it describes and differentiates our abilities from our competition and highlights the value added at each step. At the same time, it also puts our success and our people at the forefront. It puts on display our team approach to how we provide solutions to our clients. It also makes clear that DASNY is motivated by a public service mission and how we deliver our services efficiently and with expertise. Now, the other item we want to highlight, the kickoff of any new year includes the Governor's State of the State address. Governor Cuomo has begun delivering his 7th State of the State address this year. He took a new approach this time around delivering the speech at 6 venues across the state. There's one today in Albany. And really, just the core of this is progressive values, middle-class benefits, and how does this reflect us? There are 3 elements that he is focused on: jobs and infrastructure, educational access, and lower taxes. Now, the governor has also included making public college tuition free for New York's middle-class families. This would, in fact, set a national benchmark and present perhaps the greatest impact on our work should there be sizable growth in incoming students in many of these public institutions. The governor also proposed a $10 billion transformation of JFK International Airport for the 21st century, in addition to the $4 billion in upgrades already underway at LaGuardia. And he is proposing banning from the financial industry people who, if they are found to have committed egregious and deceptive acts. The governor's executive budget will be released no later than January 17th. As always, DASNY staff will distribute to the board a summary of the portions of each of these to the board, and I will provide a thorough update at our February meeting. Now, as I earlier mentioned, we have a resolution before you today to honor the 19 employees who retired from DASNY in 2016. These are 19 people who represent the commitment of every member of the DASNY team to making New York State's communities vibrant and our economy competitive. They will surely be missed by the DASNY family. Please consider the resolution at this point.
Thank you. You've all had a chance to read the resolution. It appears immediately behind the President's report, and it is very brief. Are there any questions about it? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve? Stand for second. Paul, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. I will now turn our attention to DASNY's proposed budget for fiscal year 2018. As Kim will show you in a moment, this budget projects improved operating results, even as we implement a structure to transfer knowledge. When we talk about transfer knowledge, again, we highlight to you we have 19 retirees. We anticipate many more. This transfer of knowledge will prepare DASNY for the future, and we also have a commitment to update our technology. You also have a proposal and resolution before you that will revise DASNY's fees for private clients, including the first increase in upfront fees for the first time in almost 14 years. They will increase revenue by a projected $700,000. As you look at the fees, there are three very compelling elements that we gave strong consideration to over our 7 months of discussion. And again, I want to highlight to each of you that the fee discussion is an extension of all of the work that we have done around our financing guidelines, how we look at efficiencies in our process, how we position ourselves to offer creative solutions to our clients. The three principles that were very important in presenting these fees to you, the revisions had to be simple. We had to present an alternative to the local development corporations and continue to meet on our public policy mandate. And third and finally, the fees have to reflect the structure of our costs at DASNY. So one of the things that we understood going out to talking with clients, talking with underwriters, we met with all of our underwriters, as well as even talking to investors, is that there is a value proposition associated with what we do on the diligence side. It is very unique vis-a-vis our LDCs. So again, we are not attempting to present ourselves as the lowest cost provider, but as a provider of higher value. And so with that, we went out recognizing that we were not going to pre-approve our fees with any of our clients. That was not the focus, but to talk about a broad set of changes that we have put in place here at DASNY. And then most importantly, once we do the fee structure presentation, again, we've had this effort with PFM, led by Portia and Kim, bringing both of their teams together to identify where are there efficiencies for us to simplify our process, and then most importantly, provide a high impact for our clients. So this is not just a fee discussion. We recognize on the front end it is all about fees, but behind that, beneath that, is really a lot of work associated with our positioning, the technology that we are bringing in, and the process improvement. So that is what I wanted to highlight. So, just make sure. The other aspect that is very important, we recognize that we need to expand our business opportunities, right? So we are looking at ways that we can present ourselves to, again, many of these smaller universities and colleges where we once built dormitories for. Is there some role in a construction process for us as a transactor, as an advisor? Importantly, we believe we will continue to add value for SUNY and CUNY. But most importantly, we recognize that going out and talking to many of our underwriters, that we need to do more to sell the changes, to highlight many of the changes that we have put in place. Because there are still some institutions who may see DASNY in a perspective that is probably 10 years removed from where we are. So we are looking at our top 25 relationships. We're combing relationships that once we're resident with DASNY, they're no longer here. We'll continue working on that. So this is a comprehensive effort on our part. With that, I'd like to say I've spent a lot of time with Portia and Kim and their teams, and Portia and I have spent a lot of time talking to the marketplace and really getting a sense of what is reflected in the work that we have put forth and what could be reflected in the efforts that we will continue. So again, this is just another step in the effort to be competitive and to have a higher impact and to distinguish ourselves from our competition. So Portia, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Gerard. As Gerard had said, this is, but one step in our efforts to really address our competitiveness. He referenced the financing guidelines changes that we made at the end of last year, and really our efforts to continue to streamline our processes while not diminishing, the review that you bring as our board, without really diminishing the role of staff in terms of the role that we have in meeting our obligations as an issuer. So when we concluded that work on the financing guidelines, Gerard had asked us to really take a comprehensive look at our fee schedule. He talked about the broad principles that he charged us with as we undertook that review. So let me say that the last time that we changed our fees, that we raised our upfront fee, was in April of 2003. So that's nearly 14 years ago. In that intervening time, we have made certain changes to our fee schedule, but it really reflected changes to the annual administrative fee. And the thing that we were actually doing with the annual administrative fee, recognizing the magnitude of that fee, was we actually took a number of steps to reduce that annual administrative fee. If you'll recall, and there's an appendix at the back of the memo which just lays out the dates. The annual administrative fee is something that's charged, is sort of a number of basis points against what was originally the original par issued. And at one point in time, we changed that fee to not be based on the original par issue because, it's the original par and that sort of never changes. We then assessed it against the declining balance, so basically the amount of bonds that are outstanding. For certain of our clients, are the biggest and the most frequent borrowers, they still had, very, very significant annual admin fees. So we capped those fees, as many of you will recall, at $600,000, and then we further capped those fees at $250,000. So we've taken a number of steps, I think, really to look at that fee schedule in the perspective of our competitiveness. We've taken a lot of actions, but on the upfront fee, we've not done anything since April of 2003. So really what we're looking to do here is we've made the recommendation to increase that upfront fee. We would not be doing anything in terms of changing the annual admin fee in terms of the dollar amount. What we are proposing and recommending is that we allow borrowers to capitalize up to 10 years of that annual admin fee so that could be paid at closing as a part of the bond transaction, as opposed to having the client pay that each year out of their annual operating budget. To the extent that bonds are outstanding, past the point of capitalization, that's sort of up to the 10-year mark, whatever it is that the client would choose, the client would then, if the bonds are still outstanding, pay on an annual basis from their operating budget. As far as the upfront fee is concerned, what we're talking about doing for the private client financings is increasing the fee by $50,000. It would be for all transactions, but for small publicly offered transactions. And by small, we would define that as $20 million or less. For those institutions, we're recommending that we increase the fee by $25,000. We want to be mindful of those small transactions, of their sort of price sensitivity, Oftentimes, I think you'll really recall when we bring small transactions to the board, they're generally libraries and BOCES. So we wanted to, try to be sensitive, as Gerard had indicated. One of the principles, again, he asked us to keep in mind was really sort of public policy objectives. So $50,000 upfront fee increase for all private clients, with the exception of the small publicly offered transactions. One of the things that I would note about that is that I put the emphasis when I say small and publicly offered. There's a reason for that, and that's because for private placements, even if you're small, we're recommending a $50,000 fee increase. Those transactions tend to be very complicated and very time intensive, and so they would be subject as well, sort of notwithstanding any size limitation, they would be subject as well to that $50,000 fee increase. For the school district's transactions, we would look to increase the fee from the current $75,000 to $150,000. As you will recall, those school district transactions are often comprised of numerous school districts. It could be, and there's a lot of work associated with the multiple school districts. The other change that we would make is for other pooled transactions, and here we're talking about like the pooled not-for-profit transactions like the Interagency Council, IAC. We're talking about increasing the fee there from $75,000 to $150,000. That would cover basically up to 3 borrowers. For each additional borrower above the 3, we would charge an additional $30,000. That fee in the aggregate would be divided equally amongst all of the participants. The one thing that I would note on those types of pools is that the individual borrowers, you have to go through the review process for each of them separately, given each of their financial situation. Oftentimes, those participants also have multiple projects, and to the extent that there's real estate work that needs to be undertaken, you have to do that project by project by each of the participants. They are very labor-intensive transactions, and so we were making this adjustment for those types of pools. Going back to the things that Gerard had touched on, we believe that these modifications really do meet and are consistent with the sort of the guiding principles that he laid out for us at the start of this process. As he also indicated, we know that we have more work to be done. He talked about, seeking additional efficiencies. He talked about new business opportunities. The memo also lays out, certain areas that we have identified at this point in time, including, shifting real estate work from DASNY attorneys to bond counsel in our financing transactions, creating additional standardized documents, working with bond counsel to develop practices to help really systematize the private placements. Exploring ways to reduce the number of staff that attend bond closings, reviewing our financing process, and really looking for ways in which we can achieve additional efficiencies there, and look for ways that technology could help us in that regard. Gerard gave a high-level overview of other things that we need to do in terms of really strengthening client relationships, expanding client relationships, looking to build new client relationships. And he's given us sort of a full charge in terms of the things that he wants us to do. He's asked us to reach out in addition to what we've already completed. Gerard put in place meetings with our full slate of senior underwriters. He's now asked us to reach out and meet with healthcare and higher education bankers to be able to talk to them more specifically and get more feedback in terms of things that we could do to really improve the service that we provide to our mutual clients. He's asked us to reach out to our existing clients, the ones that we see the most often, so that we can continue to be in front of them and let them know the things that we're doing here and our efforts to really strengthen our relationships with them. And he's also asked us to really look at new business opportunities, and that is, going back, looking at folks that were perhaps former DASNY clients who went away from us, also looking at new DASNY clients, folks that had not traditionally come to us. So he's really given us a full mandate in terms of, again, that comprehensive view of what it is that we need to be doing on the private client financing business. So overall, I would say that, we hope and believe that these fee increases, that they meet the goal, and that we're really threading the needle there between raising additional revenue and maintaining our competitive position. As Gerard said, we've done various kinds of outreach, and overall, we believe the fee increase is really important because it is one really critical piece of our overall efforts, these really comprehensive efforts to move forward with the private client business.
Thank you. Are there questions for Portia before we try to move on? John?
Are the private, you mentioned the private placements are more staff intensive. Is that because there's an actual buyer at the table? So there's negotiation?
That's absolutely right.
Okay. Is that an area where we really, where we could have more of a niche as opposed to IDAs? It strikes me that I would, if I was a client, I'd be very happy to have this organization helping me get that private placement done. I don't know that a local IDA could do it anything close to the effectiveness of DASNY. It's just a comment.
Well, as I think we've discussed before, we put in place through the guidelines the ability to do the private placements a number of years ago. I'm going to say it was, maybe December of 2009 or so. And I think the interesting thing is that we had all sort of expected to see a number of small institutions, unrated institutions, but we've really seen that as well as some of the larger clients really undertaking private placements because it's been a very economical alternative for them. We've seen also a large number of these private placements. I think as to the future, it remains to be seen. Some market, I guess, prognosticators, are saying that we'll have to see what happens with the new administration in Washington, what kinds of changes happen there, particularly from a tax code perspective, and what implications that may have for private placements. So we have yet to see, but there's no doubt that it's been a sizable part of our portfolio as of the last couple of years, and an important part of our portfolio.
Thank you.
Are there other? Just one second. One thing, please. We're better positioned than anybody else. Should policy reflect a greater incentive to move in that direction? And again, what I want to highlight to everyone is the level of comfort that we have as we go out and talk to investors. And investors indicate that, whether or not the underlying institution comes through, okay? If it goes through an LDC, if it goes through DASNY, is there really a big pricing difference? No. But what they say is that we recognize that when it goes through an LDC, it goes through a black box. When it goes through you, there is a level of diligence that is executed. Now, we do our own credit analysis. We do our own diligence, but we also recognize that you have built a stairway, all right, in terms of a higher threshold of rigor that we're comfortable with and our underlying investors are comfortable with. So we're very well positioned should that take off.
Thanks, George. Other questions? Paul?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Gerard, you mentioned the conversations you've had with the investment community and with your underwriters, and I assume the results, although you probably weren't talking about specifics in terms of where the fees might go, I take it they were positive and that there was the market was receptive to what you were talking about in general terms. I mean, would you be able to summarize briefly what the results of those conversations were?
Like I said, we weren't focused on pre-approving our fees. What we were focused on was highlighting that we're looking to change our fees. And so we got back from people, well, you know, your fees have been pretty low for a long period of time. Okay, we understand that. Do you anticipate any problems, any tripwires? No, I mean, look, you guys are telegraphing to the market, number one, that you are going to be responsive. This was the first thing that everyone said. You're going to be responsive to clients. That clients are not going to come in and you say, here's a cookie cutter, this is the way we do it. All right? That you're going to offer creative solutions for them. Now, if you can't do it, or you choose not to do this transaction, that's fine, but you're going to do it in a way in which you're saying, we're here to provide a solution and assistance. If we believe that this is a go, this is how you get there. If we believe it's not a go, or this is a pathway that you have to take because we have the infrastructure in place. So that's the kind of feedback we were getting from investors. They didn't see any issues or problems.
You had a second question?
Yeah, a second question. So Portia, you talked about going, and Gerard, about going out and connecting with, you know, current customers, past customers, potential customers, which is great, obviously important for executing on the mission. At the end of the day, I guess it always becomes sort of a staffing issue, an attention issue, and I mean, I see that the headcount has been declining. Do you have the who is we and us, and do you have the staff and the bandwidth to do that really important marketing function?
It's a good question. And you know, I have to say that this has been really a priority of Gerard since he's gotten here. We've done this, and we've been meeting with the clients. So I think this represents just a further emphasis as far as that's concerned. It's certainly, I think, a bigger priority, really, under Gerard's leadership. So I think we will be able to accommodate this. You know, there's been some shifting around of staff, and that should be helpful in that regard. But I think it represents sort of a further emphasis, because we really started to do this really since Gerard came on board. That was one of the first things that he did when he came here, is he asked for those types of meetings.
Okay.
And if we feel we change the focus and a number of priorities, okay, which is, again, this is a public institution, but it's a corporation, all right? And we do have to identify efficiencies, and we have costs, right? And the costs grow. And so we have to cover that, which means that we just can't wait for institutions to say, oh, okay, DASNY, we've worked with you for 30 years, when in fact we know that there are very compelling alternatives to them, because people are price sensitive. We get that. But they're not only price sensitive, they want value added. So if for some reason we evaluate this and we think we need more resources, we will find the resources for this, because this is a priority for the future of this organization in terms of how we penetrate a market and how we convey to partners who previously were with us, who might not be with us for a lot of different reasons, why they should be with us. And that is the process of helping educate and marketing to them, and that's one of the reasons why we identified a Capabilities Brochure in Steve Coro's business, working very closely with Steve, as well as Paul Koopman, Dan Petroff, a whole host of folks in terms of how can we deliver and rethink our business. We've got The design build with Rockport, very important project. So I look at all of this together. I don't look at it separately. So if there is a pressure or a challenge, we will find a resource, because that is a bedrock of a business. Okay, as someone once said to me when I left the controller's office, I think it was over 18, 19 years, and I was trying to figure out how to get into business. They said one thing to me. They said, we've got a lot of Skinners here, all right, but we need gatherers. And so we need to skin and gather at the same time, and we will do that.
Sandra, did you have a question?
Actually, I think Paul covered it, although just a comment to follow up on his second question. When I looked at that list of efficiencies that we might achieve, and the former budget person, I'm all for efficiencies, what I thought of too was fewer people. That's what it led to, and with fewer financings, we've had those cutbacks. And Gerard addressed this too. We just need to be sure we do have that right balance, because to work with our customers, to keep them happy and with us, we need live bodies as well as technology efficiencies.
Well, Portia, I have a question. Assuming that the administrative fees are capitalized upfront, it makes sense that those fees can't be refunded. There's no way to send that money back. Remind me of the circumstances under which administrative fees are refundable.
The administrative fees are not refundable.
So
and they continue to not be refundable.
Okay.
I
sat here thinking I must have missed something.
No, you know what? I think to the extent that we were talking about capitalizing them, it sort of raised the question of, if you're going to pay them all at once up front, is there some ability to get a refund? So if, for example, we say you can capitalize up to 10 years of fees,
right,
and that's because bonds are generally callable at the 10-year mark. If somebody capitalized 10 years and then they refunded after year 8, are they refundable? And the answer is no.
But the answer really is no.
Well, and there's additional reason.
I mean, but it's no for all administrative fees.
Now they're paid, you know.
I mean, capitalizing the fees does not make a difference.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Right, but now they're paid, you know, as you go. If you refinance, you stop paying the fees. But what we also wanted to do is...
But those fees have not been prepaid.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. Right. We wanted to be sure that if the fee was capitalized, it wouldn't count against the fees that you can finance on a tax-exempt basis. Right now, our upfront fee is not subject to what's called the 2% limit.
Got it.
And one of the criteria for not having the capitalized fees not be able to be financed was that it was non-refundable.
Okay.
It's one of the tax code requirements.
Are there other questions before we vote? I'm sorry, John.
It's been an extraordinary amount of work. And one of the reasons it was an extraordinary amount of work was how long it's been since we raised the fees. And as I said in a previous meeting, I am sure that there are, with due respect to my colleagues here, some of the lawyers' fees on the other side have not remained static for that period of time. And so I just think the watchword going forward is that fees should be evaluated on a regular basis. And so you don't do $50,000 or $100,000 at one crack. You do $5,000 at a crack, and it's sort of the death of 1,000 slits.
John, Gerard and I have had that discussion as recently as 2 days ago, and clearly that's the right answer. Clearly.
We are looking at that. Everything's on the table. It's important, again, to highlight the response to you, Sandra. Value added. And the value added is reflected in the people who work and provide a source of insight and a set of opportunities, or an ability to tell a client that this is not the right way to do this transaction. That we think, strike that we know is unique to us vis-a-vis everyone else. So that won't change. What we're saying is, in terms of fewer people and technology, bringing the technology up front, okay, and helping the people, all right, using that as a source to empower our folks to do many more things that they recognize they need to do. So we feel very good about that. And again, this is an extension of many things. The other thing I want to say is an omission on my part. And, you know, this was very broad. And I want to thank, the omission is, I didn't highlight the work that Mike Cusack and his team also did in terms of when we got together. This really was collaborative. And we needed to make sure that we had all of the efficiencies and the impacts, but to the letter and the spirit of the law, okay? Because there's no paucity of challenges out there, legal challenges, policy challenges, and as we confront a new day, okay, a new day with a new administration, we want to make sure that we have the right stamp of approval. So I want to thank Mike as well. I also want to thank Mike Corrigan and Caroline Griffith, who are not present, for keeping the focus on this. This was very important. And I know that I was not simple to work with during that period of time. I acknowledge that. But I felt it was very important for us to get to the right yes and to have, number one, simplicity. Because we had a lot of iterations and it was very hard, and I felt it was very difficult to come before you with, here's a fee, but for. And so everybody really worked very hard at this. And again, we're proud of the changes that we're making, and we're not looking to be an LDC.
Congratulations to your staff.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, John.
Is it fair to say that the Capabilities Brochure was part and parcel of introducing the fee change to the market? Is that why that was done?
So we did the Capabilities Brochure really to help illustrate the multiplicity of roles and functions that we have here. So there's really not a fee discussion inside of that. Okay. We want to lead. What I have learned in my business career is if you want to be best in class, you don't lead with fees, you lead with value. Right? In other words, my fees are what they are.
Yeah, no, I wasn't saying that there was a fee discussion, but as long as you're introducing a price hike, you're also saying at the same time, this is why, and we got a better network.
Got it. Are there other questions before we consider the resolution?
Al, just one note before the board considers the resolution. The resolution carries an effective date immediately. I just wanted to note that for those clients that we are currently working with, that are currently in the pipeline, they would be subject to the existing or the older fee schedule. So this is really for new folks coming in the door.
So effective today, any new folks?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, because I wasn't sure and meant to ask. The resolution we're considering is dated January 11, 2017. It appears immediately behind a similar resolution, changed, similar. It was dated March 9, 2016. It is in behind tab 9. It's after the president's report. We've had a chance to look at it, and you've raised a lot of questions about it. Hearing no further questions, may I have a motion to approve the resolution? Yes?
Based on what Portia just said,
Yes.
is it clear the way the resolution is written that it will not affect clients in the pipeline? Is that?
It's not a part of the resolution
It
itself.
just says take effect immediately.
Right.
We spoke to clients. We've informed clients.
So the clients know?
Yes.
All right. But no, it's not, that does not appear in the resolution itself, sir. You're asking whether it should. Yeah, I believe that's wiser people than I, but I think the answer to that's no. If you tell the clients.
Yeah, I think the thinking behind it was that we actually had played with that in the resolution at one point, and making it effective at various points in time was not making sense. So we looked at it as it's effective immediately. full basis.
Going forward.
For any transactions. So that we wouldn't have the resolution taking effect if there was once in time.
You guys are okay.
I think the intent now has been stated publicly, so, it's
That's
the
in the pipeline. If
intention.
you're in the pipeline, you get the old rate. If you're
Yes.
coming in the door,
Yes.
5 seconds from now, you'll get the rate.
May I have a motion, please, to approve the resolution? Thank you, Sandra. Is there a second? Gerard, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. Hearing no opposition, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you all.
Before, I got that. I now turn things over to Kim McGow, who will present the proposed 2017-2018 operating budget.
Thank you, Gerard. Good morning. I've asked Jeff Arnold to join me. I assure you that my knowledge of the budget and its details are dwarfed by Jeff's, who is instrumental in pulling all of this together. As you can imagine, the size of our budget is sizable. I wanted to focus my points in two major areas. First, looking at the numbers, of course. And then secondly, very importantly, looking at the operational side. What are we doing with the dollars that we're proposing here in the 17-18 budget? So first, a look at the numbers, and as the CFO, I want to start with the bottom line. We are proposing in this budget a significant improvement in the bottom line earnings. Last year, we ended the year losing $2.1 million, and the proposed budget has an improvement to a $460,000 loss. Now, there are really two primary drivers to the improvement in the earnings. The first is a higher proportion of our work being spent supporting our public clients, clearly the largest portion of the increase. And the second component, as you might guess, is the impact of the change in the fee structures that you just proposed, or just approved. Underlying those results, of course, we have a sizable operating budget. For the 17-18 year, that's a $79 million budget. A small increase over the projected year end for the current year of $77 million. That's a 2.6% increase over our current year projection. And here too, we have really two primary drivers. The first and the largest is related to our employee compensation and contractual obligations that we have for that compensation, both in terms of salaries, where we're seeing salaries for our current employees increase by 2.3% as a result of step increases in our collective bargaining agreement. And we also have contractual obligations as it relates to our benefit plans, our post-retirement health care, our pension plans. The other area is our investment in technology. As we've spoken in some prior meetings, we really need to increase our investment in that area. We are looking to make DASNY a more mobile environment. We want to be more collaborative in terms of being able to share information with our clients, our vendors, and each other. With those increased costs in software and applications also come increased risk. So we also need to invest money in our security so that we make sure that our data and our systems remain secure. I also want to provide a little bit of history on our expenditures before I move on to the operational discussion. When you look back over the last few years, and I know you're all aware of the trend we've seen in the construction division, where we've moved from a smaller number of large projects to a higher volume of small projects. That requires a higher level of administration and infrastructure. And despite that, since 2009, our headcount has reduced by over 100 or 18%. We've also reduced our non-personnel expenditures by 14% since 2011. And those are important factors in our ability to defer the fee increases that we just discussed. Moving on to our operational discussions, there are a few notable activities that are embedded within those results within that $79 million proposed operating budget. I want to start first with the key corporate initiatives that we're undertaking. Certainly, we want to continue to support the state and its healthcare reform initiatives. We're also working to position DASNY for the future, as Gerard has mentioned. That has two major components, both technology and human capital. Technology, I just talked about some of the key areas there. Mobility, infrastructure, security are all important, all need to be funded. And on the human capital side, we're working very diligently to make sure that we're transferring knowledge. We have critical operations, critical contacts. All of that information needs to be transferred across a multi-generational workforce. By using some of the reserve funds that you have set aside, we're able to invest in these initiatives, help DASNY to evolve, help it to grow, and reduce its risk while minimizing the negative impacts on our bottom line. Moving on to the construction division, we have some significant pipeline going into the future. When you look at what's underlying the budget here, approximately 80% for both our CUNY and SUNY projects represent projects that are in the preliminary and design phase. So we've got a lot of work after the 17-18 fiscal year still to go on those projects. That's in terms of the number of projects. It's about 70% of the dollars that are embedded within the budget. And then wrapping up with the financing side of our business, there we expect to issue new product that is sufficient to cover the bond administration fees that will be rolling off in the next fiscal year as a result of their normal maturities. Before I open to questions, I do want to thank Jeff and his team. As I said, this is an enormous undertaking, and I can make it look easy by presenting this, but the materials that you received, all the analysis that goes behind it, that all comes from Jeff and his team, and also a significant level of support when we were working on the fee structure. We could not possibly have analyzed what the costs were that were driving the need for an increase without Jeff's efforts and his team. With that, I will turn it over to you for questions.
Yes, Sandra.
Kim, I'm looking at the head count on page 15. Last year, we were 490, we went down 472, we're proposing to come up to 491. What's the distribution of those employees, either filled vacancies or new positions created? Where are we adding people?
But to get to the 491, I'd say that those are largely new employees, but there certainly were replacements as well, but I think Jeff could give you a little bit more detail.
491 is where we actually are today, so those are actually all filled positions currently.
Also,
yeah, so we're proposing that we fund 515 FTEs next year, and we're at 491 today.
and where will these people be placed in the organization? Where are we adding new employees?
Really throughout the organization, but I think the majority of our recruitments have been within construction recently, which is consistent with where our headcount is too. The largest portion of our headcount is within construction.
And certainly the retirements that we've been seeing and upcoming in the next couple of years that we're planning for are largely hitting the construction organization.
And we're trying.
This is net of retirement, so if there's someone retired and replace them, that doesn't increase your net.
Yeah.
It doesn't, but for a period of time, there are cases where we need to bring people on board with sufficient overlap so that they have proper training. And so there is a level of duplication in the FTE count for that purpose.
That should be very low.
But, we're looking at, so what we recognized when we undertook on the succession planning, we literally had large numbers of people in key businesses who were walking out the door and had no ability to retain that intellectual capital. So we moved very immediately in terms of those who were maybe leaving in the next year or two, try to build out a succession planning. So maybe that overlap is 6 months. Maybe it's pushed depending on the level of expertise associated with some of those positions. It's pushed out a little longer, but there are a lot of positions where we didn't have succession planning. So, but it's not a lot.
So this number might be a bit artificially high then for this year. As your succession plan works, you might drop down.
I don't know.
In theory, depending on workload as well.
Sure.
Reference a couple of things in the pipeline that could lead to financing workload as well. That could lead to us staying at these numbers, despite the retirements that net against new members.
The timing of our recruitment processes will also be a key factor. There are certain positions that we find very difficult to fill. So we seek to fill them as quickly as possible. If we're fortunate that we can fill those sooner rather than later, we would end up with more overlap. But if history continues, then we're more apt to see the favorable side, I guess, as you would think of it from an FTE count, not as favorable from an hours.
And there are positions that I think we presented this at the last meeting, I can't remember, where we recognize there's a higher velocity of change and that we're just isolating and focusing on those, particularly where we think there could be some gaps.
Other questions for Ken? Paul?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Kim, I think I picked up from what you presented and from what I'm looking at here that the deficit was 2.4 million in 15-16, decreases to proposed of 460,000, and then steps up again to 1.5 over the next 3 years. Is that regarded as sustainable, or are there efforts to address that deficit, or what's the what's the long-term plan? As I see deficit going back up after having come down.
I think a lot of that has to do with not being overly aggressive in terms of what we assume for new issuances, but I will defer for more detail to Jeff on that.
Yeah, I think normally with this 5-year plan, we tend to be conservative on the out years. Obviously, we're not asking anybody to act on 2020 at this point, but we tend to assume that there's going to be some revenue bleed off, whether it be from administrative fees on issues that matured, or just a reduction in financing activity.
So this is consistent with the past. You budget conservatively, and then, if all works out, then.
And as part of the first subsequent year, so 18, 19, there are additional stepping increases for salaries, and I think that's in excess of 600,000, and so that will continue to carry forward into the out years without really a compensating increase in the revenue side.
So your out years are basically a straight line projection. If we don't do anything to reduce them, this is what it would be like.
Are there other questions from Kim?
Well, one further question. And Kim, you referenced this somewhat, and I'm not sure if you're the right person to answer this fully, but as far as investments in technology go, clearly the world is waking up to the cybersecurity risks over the last few years. Do the technology investments adequately address the risks that the organization faces? And I don't know who can.
We hired a cybersecurity person who's responsible for cybersecurity. That's the first step, and we're very focused on that. We recognize that's a big challenge. That's a big business risk. So our business has to continue focusing on that with this person.
Did the person start?
Yes, actually, thank you. Yes, we hired a new information security officer. He began last month. His first responsibilities are really focusing, concurrently reviewing all of our policies and procedures to make sure that they are what he would expect them to see, identifying any gaps that he may see from his prior experience and or with New York State and where they have headed. And also looking at our major projects to make sure that he's comfortable with the security that's involved there. The dollars that we have proposed in the upcoming years do have a significant increase in our infrastructure, so increasing our firewalls, our firewall monitoring, our bandwidths. Really that is, to me, the first thing we need to address before we go out and provide a lot of new mobile applications and technology. We need to get that foundation in place to make sure it's supporting today's operations as well as going forward. And there are projects that, as we speak, are going on while we're considering what we're doing on the application side and mobile technology. The firewalls and the infrastructure, those are happening as we speak downstairs.
And one of the this is important to highlight. I should have said this first. Our internal audit team, Kathy Ebert, identified this as an area of possible risk over time that we have to address and identify. So that is, again, we've responded to that.
There are coming changes in the healthcare field that none of us around this table really have a grasp on what they will be in the next couple of months, obviously. We don't know how it's going to impact the healthcare clients that we service. It could be no impact, it could be a devastating impact. Your projections are based upon the past in regard to your business from in the healthcare field. Do we have a mechanism in place to revisit this in 6 months or 7 months to see how these things? I mean, I recognize we're looking at a crystal ball, but nonetheless, it seems to me that there will be some.
Clearly we'll have to look at this, but I think in the scope of our private client issuances, we probably have more higher education than
absolutely
healthcare. So, but saying that, that is certainly an important issue. That's an important issue for the Department of Health. That's an important issue for us. That's an important issue for these institutions. So we will monitor that.
I mean, I believe we're very conservative in the number of years we anticipate. So the amount of upfront fee that's associated with the revenues with this budget from private higher ed institutions is fairly low.
Yeah, and that goes back to the point of the out years on the financial plan. They're very conservative revenue estimates. There's an assumption that it's going to reduce in those out years.
Right. Okay. I'll skip. We can. Portia Lee will now provide you with a market update.
Thank you, Gerard. Behind tab 11 are the standard public finance reports. Since my last written report, we placed 2 transactions, one for Brightpoint and one for Providence Rest. As to the brief market update, total municipal volume totaled $445 billion in 2016, up 12% from the previous year. In January, we have seen, as is typical, reinvestment. Money's coming back into the market to be invested. At the end of last week, I guess the last time we had talked, we were talking about the fact that rates were rising. At the end of last week, yields on the 10 and 30-year MMD was 7 and 4 basis points lower, respectively, and have decreased further this week by 2 and 3 basis points in the early part of this week. Municipal supply totaled $3.5 billion last week and is expected to be about $9.5 billion this week. Municipal bond funds continue to report outflows with approximately $900 million last week. Since the last board meeting, though, we have seen 10 and 30-year MMD decrease approximately 21 basis points and 26 basis points, respectively. Also just included for your information in my report is the quarterly financial advisor update. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Questions for Portia? Hearing none, there are 2 matters for executive session. May I have a motion, please, to go into executive session to discuss the financial and credit history of particular corporations? Thank you, Paul. Charlie, thank you for the second. All in favor, please indicate by aye. We are in executive session. The record will reflect that we have just left an executive session during which there were no decisions made other than to return to the public session. Mr. President, we still have the construction report which you're going to manage.
Before I turn the floor over to Steve for his monthly construction update, I want to highlight our latest active construction project with the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery. Last month, DASNY and Gozer broke ground on an addition to a volunteer firehouse in the town of Rotterdam. We are managing design and construction for the project, which will also include an emergency operations command center, triage area, and installation of a backup power generator. The project will improve the department's ability to respond to severe storm-related emergencies while providing ample space for residents to seek emergency medical services. It is part of Gozer's New York Rising Community Reconstruction Program, which is designed to empower communities impacted by powerful storms in their recovery. Steve Kuro will now provide you with an update on the construction division's work.
Thank you. Behind tab 12 are the 3 construction division reports. The first report, the construction projects report. On its cover is a photograph of Shepherd Hall, a roof replacement project at City College we recently completed. The scope of the project was to remove and replace the slate roof over the Great Hall at Shepherd Hall. The budget was $5 million. SGH was our designer. The design started in May of 2012 and completed in June of 2013. Our CM was URS, who is now AECon. Our general contractor was Minelli Construction. Construction started in April of 2015 and completed in November of 2016. Some of the project challenges included access to the work area due to the building's design and architectural features at the roof area, and keeping the construction area watertight as the building is occupied during the construction. I have some additional pictures. This is phase, I think, 13 of the renovation of Shepherd Hall. The first phase was back in 1988, and there's been over $300 million of renovations done to this wall since 1988. That include both interior and exterior renovation projects, roofs, windows, terracotta repair, parapet rehabilitation, interior finishes, and restoration. So it's quite an old gem. You guys on the board was down there looking at the ASRC project. This is the campus the building is.
So, I wasn't there. Where is this building now?
It's right in Harlem.
In Harlem.
Yeah. City College.
Did we replace the slate roof with slate?
Yes. You can't do much to this building based on its historic nature that isn't in kind. On page 3 of the same report, there's a listing of 6 new construction projects totaling over $45 million in project cost. 5 are for CUNY, 1 is for DOH. They're maintenance and upgrade type projects that we are beginning at this point. And on page 8, the construction expenditures through November. Prior year to date, we were at $420 million. Currently, we're at $397 million, a delta of $23 million. A couple of projects to update you on. I'll start with the Court Officer Training Academy. We received schedule update number 26 in late December, which communicated a May 2017 TCO date. That's 20 days beyond the prior communicated schedule update. At the present time, all trades are engaged in buildings 1 and 2 in the renovation efforts, with a particular focus on interior framing, MEP systems, and site utility work. In addition, the bridge framing between buildings 1 and 2 has commenced. Windows are scheduled for their arrival in late January, and installation should complete on the windows by March. Our next bi-weekly project status meeting is scheduled for January 12th. Next up is the Javits Convention Center expansion. Early foundation work has begun at the Javits project for the transformer building. DASNY is the code permitting agency, and we issued a building permit to begin that construction back in December, allowing construction to progress under the New York City Building Code. Bernard Feinton, 7 and 8. The project obtained a temporary approval for occupancy on December 29th, effective January 6th. Final punch list and commissioning work continues as we work toward a code compliance certificate anticipated in February of 17th, next month. And at the ASRC CCNY project, we executed a settlement agreement with our project construction manager on December 30th, closing out the $700 million CNF risk ASRC CCNY project. Day 2 tenant fit-out continues on the project at this time. A couple of SUNY updates. The Brockport project, we selected a design-build team to progress the 250-bed residence hall. Design will continue under this team, with construction expected to complete in the summer of 2018. So just a quick comment on that. So design is at 30%. We anticipate occupying this new residence hall next year for the fall semester. If we were doing it the traditional design bid build way, it would likely be the following fall, 2019. So, through this method, we are certainly picking up some time, which equates to dollars for Brockport. On the purchase projects, design continues on the new 300-bed residence hall. The design should be complete and bidding anticipated in March of this year. We have 5 SUNY rehabilitation projects that are currently underway. They started in December. A $10 million project at SUNY Albany, a $17 million project at SUNY Alfred, a $17 million project at SUNY Plattsburgh. That one actually started back in June of 16. A $19 million project at SUNY New Paltz, and a $13 million project at SUNY Oswego. So there's heavy SUNY dorm renovation activity this year. All of these projects need to be completed for fall of this year occupancy. And on the summer project size, we've got somewhere between 27 and 30 projects that will begin in May and complete in August with a total value of about $31 million. Lastly, on NYCHA, the security projects continue to progress on the 4 phases. On the appliance purchase and installation side, we continue. We started that back in November, December. We purchased and installed a number of appliances at a number of different developments. That effort continues this month. And we're awaiting the start of the non-security projects as those projects continue to be vetted. Just 2 quick notes on technology. We've begun to review construction management software products as our current application is no longer being enhanced with additional functionality. This is a long-term project. It's an initiative jointly sponsored by our IS group and construction. We're in the early process of looking at products as we begin the search. And lastly, IS developed a dashboard reporting tool for the construction division. It continues to be enhanced. The tool allows for our managers to view their projects and alert the end users to problem indicators. We use this tool currently at our monthly upstate and downstate project status meetings. That concludes my report.
Thanks, Steve. Are there questions for Steve? I did have one, Steve. Where you list the various projects and the costs, the budget, the current authorized budget, and the expenditures to date, on page 15, just caught my eye. Western, it's at the bottom of the page, Western New York Children's Psychiatric Center, and our work is to correct life safety code deficiencies. Did that arise because of a normal inspection? Did something happen in that case to bring that to the attention of the state so that, I mean, you may not have any special knowledge about this, you may not know about this one, you don't, I'm sure you don't know about each one of these, but...
I do know about everything. No, I don't. But OMH goes through a process of inspection on their facilities year over year. And typically that's how some of the DASNY projects get generated.
Okay.
So they've had an inspection done here. The project, when you see TBD under the schedule, it means the project's in design.
Sure.
And we don't set a construction date until we come out of design and bid the project, and we then indicate the construction completion date. But these projects typically come to us through an internal process at OMH.
Okay. Fair enough, thank you. Other questions? Steve? Hearing none, the general counsel has advised that he does not have a report at the end of the meeting. His fine hand is actually evident throughout this book, and I want to thank you for all the work you're doing, because I know it's not easy. Is there any other business to come before the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to adjourn the meeting? Charlie, thank you. John Johnson, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.